Well, greetings and welcome to another edition of the Has Been podcast. I'm your resident Has Been host as we come to you on the last day of March 2026 and a lot to kind of recap. I don't know how much there is to look ahead, but um, recap the men in San Jose, more transfer portal news for the women, and why doesn't Purdue baseball team have an NIL deal with Denny's after last weekend at Michigan State? And um, volleyball is playing a Big Ten SEC Challenge coming up next season. The Big Ten is throwing all the chips in on volleyball here, doing a lot of different things. And if I remember, we'll talk about that. But first, the men season came to an end in San Jose, lost to Arizona by 15. Purdue led by 7 at half. As you know, Arizona is just really good. And uh, some thoughts about the game. The foul trouble really hurt Purdue. Um, Trey Kaufman-Renn picking up those early two fouls, threw off the rotations. Um, I think it's been pretty clear the last few weeks of the season that they didn't really want to play Daniel Jacobson against teams like Michigan and Arizona and some other teams from a physicality standpoint. Um, he just he's just not strong enough really to battle in there, and so he was forced to play more. He was forced to play with Oscar Clough, a combination they have not practiced a whole lot this season, and therefore you had some issues there. Even though Purdue did lead in the first half with those two on the floor, it was not a sustainable lineup that they could do a lot of damage with. And then, Trakoff and Wren picked up foul number 3 early in the second half, and things started to unravel for Purdue, and they got going for Arizona. As I said, they're a really good team. They've only lost 2 games all year, and they'd never trailed in the NCAA tournament until Purdue got ahead of them. But then they got going. They just have guys that can elevate over you, um, and everybody's a threat on the floor to score. They have good size, just like Purdue has good size. Um, really good team. I would I would probably put them as a favorite going into the Final Four this week, but the Final Four is kind of balanced too. So it's not some will say that the national championship games on the Saturday between Michigan and Arizona. Hard to disagree with that. But anyway, with Arizona, they were really good. They didn't make many mistakes. Um, and Purdue just didn't shoot well. They didn't shoot well in the 2 games from perimeter. They were 4-20 against Texas. I think they ended up um, 12 of 40 something in the 2 games. They didn't, shoot the ball particularly well, and I think that hurt them. And then against Arizona, not having, Kaufman-Renn for the normal minutes you would have him, I think played a big role um, in the outcome. And then you're dipping into your bench and you're getting guys on the floor that you haven't had guys on the floor together with for a lot, especially in pressure packed minutes. And this is what you end up with. And did Purdue need to play the perfect game? No, but it couldn't have the situations that it had and going to beat a team like Arizona. Purdue had some issues against Texas, but they were able to overcome those. Um, and some things Texas did played into Purdue's hands, like not having their. They were better with their big guy off the floor against Purdue than they were with their big guy on the floor. Uh, I can't pronounce his name because it's got a lot of vowels in it. Because they were more athletic. with him off the floor, and that seemed to give some Purdue some problems. But they had problems dealing with Trey Kaufman-Renn too. Um, but anyway, the season came to an end. It's probably a disappointing finish to the season because of where they were at the beginning of the year, where they thought they would be at the end of the year. And I mean, it's not disappointing all the way because ultimately they thought that they could win the national championship. Um, but it didn't happen, and you don't know what each season is going to bring. On paper, Purdue was one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country at the beginning of the year. But as time went on, you know, Arizona moves to that spot, Michigan moves to that spot. Duke is in that position. Other teams um, have more than what you think, and other teams don't have as much as you think. Purdue's rough patch at the end of the season cost it an opportunity to be in the best position possible. And this is what I mean by that. When you started the year, you thought that Purdue would win the Big Ten regular season, maybe win the Big Ten tournament title, even though that really doesn't matter. Be a number one seed, and your path would be from St. Louis to Chicago to Indy. Well, you got part of that right. They did end up in St. Louis, but when you get right before the NCAA tournament, um, most thought that Purdue would be in Michigan's spot, number one seed, Big Ten regular season champs. They lost in the championship game to Purdue in the Big Ten tournament, but that would be their path. And it wasn't. Therefore you had to go a different way. They still made it to the Elite Eight, but when you got to the Elite Eight, you're playing Arizona, which is a number one seed and one of the best teams in the country, while Michigan's playing Tennessee, not a number one seed, not one of the best teams in the country. And, Purdue has a mojo over Tennessee right now. And the other thing that played a role in Purdue was actually winning the Big Ten tournament hurt them from a seeding perspective. And the committee told you that on Selection Sunday. They told you that Purdue winning the Big Ten tournament vaulted them over Illinois and Michigan State on the seed line to the number 8 seed, which was the last number 2 seed, which the only opening at that point was um, the West, which had Arizona as the number 1. I mean, if Purdue doesn't win the Big Ten tournament, or Purdue doesn't win 3 games in the Big Ten tournament, or they get to the championship game and lose, they're probably not a number 2 seed. Therefore, they would be a number 3 seed. And you're either in Illinois or Michigan State's position. Hindsight is what it is. And Purdue didn't have a horrible path to get to the Elite Eight. It had a pretty good path. You played Queens, which is making its first NCAA appearance in its first year of Division One. You play an athletic and physical Miami team, which Purdue handled. And then you get Texas, which is an 11 seed, which had played one more game because they were in the play-in game. It took a tip by Trey Kaufman-Renn to win it at the end, so you were in a fight for 40 minutes. But if you were in Illinois' position, let's say you were a 3 seed, while there had been some disappointment there at the beginning, when you start to chart their path, they played Penn, which they handled. Then VCU upends North Carolina, and North Carolina probably was overseeded anyway because they didn't have their star player. And then, you do have to go to Houston and play Houston in Houston, which I don't think that's that big of a deal. Yes, they had maybe more fans in Illinois, but let me tell you something. Every game, every college basketball game, one team has more fans than the other. It just happens, especially, even in neutral court situations. One team has more fans than the other. In San Jose, Arizona had more fans than Purdue, as they should, because it was it was closer for them, and the NCAA has made it clear they are rewarding. They're going to stay on their geography path, and the higher seed you are, the closer you play to home. That's how they're doing it. That's how they, it's working for them. It's working to have environments the way they want it. Although the games in San Jose were not sellouts, um, well attended, but not sellouts. Um, so one team's going to have more fans than the other. It's the way it is, and it happens in all sports. I mean, it just does. But if Purdue was in Illinois' position, they would have played Houston, which they played Houston last year. Would they have beat Houston? I don't know. Illinois did, but Illinois got a different team than Purdue. I mean, let's just say for this 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 argument I'm making here, Purdue does beat Houston in Houston. Then who's on the other side? Iowa in the Elite Eight. And I'm going to tell you right now, Purdue would have beat Iowa, just like Illinois beat Iowa. It wasn't easy for Illinois, and it wouldn't have probably been easy for Purdue. But you'd much rather play Iowa than Arizona to get to the Final Four. So Purdue could have been in Illinois' path if they hadn't won the Big Ten tournament. So, which, looking back on it now, you take a loss in the Big Ten tournament to get to where Illinois, um, you get to where Illinois is at today, and that is a spot in the Final Four. Or Purdue could have been a Michigan State spot. Then you played UConn in the Sweet 16, and UConn is like a vampire. You have to drive the stake through their heart, and no one's been able to do that yet. But you just don't know when these Big Ten tournaments playing out. Purdue needed to win the Big Ten tournament, or needed to play well in the Big Ten tournament. They needed to play multiple games in the Big Ten tournament to get itself straightened out. The bottom line is Purdue did not take care of its business in the regular season. They go 6-7 in their last 13 games. They did play a tough schedule, and the metrics were in their favor, and that's why they were able to get a 2 seed. At the time, you were taking the 2 seed because it was better than the 3 seed. It gave you a reward for the season that you had. But looking back, it wasn't probably the best path for Purdue. But that's just the way it worked out. Bottom line is this team probably should have been in the position Michigan was in and won the Big Ten regular season. Ended up being a number 1 seed in Chicago and having all those things that come with it, um, giving you the best opportunity to get to the Final Four. But they didn't. Still made a nice run. Um, it's the end of an era with the 3 seniors. Um, lots of talk and um, praise for them staying uh, throughout their career at one school. Will it happen again? Probably. Um, it may happen at Purdue, and Purdue's a program where it will happen more than it doesn't. Um, but it'll happen again. It just it will. I mean, you'll have more players probably leave for the NBA as opposed to transferring. Um, but it'll happen. It'll happen again. It's just I don't. If things settle down, and that's a big if, then um, I think you'll see more of it. Um, it is. It was interesting watching unfold, knowing that that the game against Arizona potentially could be the end for the run of Trey Kaufman, Wren, Braden Smith, and Fletcher Lawyer. Winning his class in program history, winning his class when it comes to NCAA tournament victories. I mean, they set records and shattered records and played before sellouts, and they won games in Hawaii and Bahamas and San Diego and who knows, Lord, where else. Um, So they did everything. I mean, they got to the Final Four. They got to the national championship game. They won Big Ten regular season titles. They won Big Ten tournament titles. They did just about everything you could do in a college basketball career. They're a number one seed and they lose to a 16 seed. So the highs and the lows, and all those experiences made them better people, better human beings. Should serve them well once they're done playing sports. So I do think we'll see it again. I don't know if we'll see it at this level where you have three, but I do think you'll see it again. I don't think it's a complete outlier. It's probably hard to look at that now and say that'll happen, but I do think it'll happen at some point. And it'll in programs like Purdue and other places. Um, it'll happen there more frequently than others, just um, because Purdue offers something that others don't. And there's other programs out there that offer the same thing, and they'll have the same success. But you have to admit that we did watch something pretty special over the last 4 years, develop and come to fruition and see it play out the way that it did. I never really thought any of them would leave, um, even though there were always stories and chatter that this school's going to give them a better deal type thing, and but I think you credit Purdue for stepping up in the NIL world and making them feel like Purdue was the best place for them, and and they took advantage of it, but also Purdue took advantage of them and has benefited from their presence, just like they have benefited. You know, those three have benefited from Purdue's presence. Purdue has benefited from their presence, and it's a two-way street in that regard. Um, so it'll be different next season. Will there be some portal movement from the program? Quite possibly. Um, they're adding pieces right now, or they have added them. I'm not going to say they're doing it at this moment, but they have added them, and they've got a couple red shirts that did not play this year that will now start playing a bigger role. And it will be more intriguing how it all kind of fits together. And what you see at the beginning next year may not be what you see at the end. This year and the last couple of years, things have been pretty well set. You get Braden here, Fletcher here, Trey Kaufman there, and then you were just filling in around them. Now you've got to fill in, a lot of different holes. Uh, so it'll be intriguing from that standpoint that you have something to look forward to and a lot of competition in the off season. And Oscar Clough, whether he comes back or not, depending on the ruling out there, how does that all factor in? So I mean, there's again a lot of intrigue with the team moving forward and how it will look and who's going to be in what position, and it'll be somewhat fascinating to follow, see kind of how it all unfolds, um, because you haven't had to do that in the last few years. As I said, things have been pretty well set. So, good season, not a great year based on the expectations. Not that the fans put on them, but they put on themselves. I mean, they embraced the idea of getting to the national championship game and winning it, which is fine. They embraced it. I mean, it doesn't mean the season was a disappointment. It just they didn't achieve what they wanted to achieve, regardless of what the outside noise was. They wanted to go win a national title, and there's nothing wrong with saying that and trying to do it. It didn't happen, and there's a lot of reasons why it didn't happen. There's a lot of reasons why they got in the position they got in, but it didn't happen. And now they move on to the next phase, and this program moves on to the next phase. It'll it won't be in the forefront as much as it was, at least at the beginning. But you remember a few years ago, you know, program was program's been fine, have been doing well, but then that tournament in Portland, Oregon, when they won the Nike tournament, kind of opened everybody's eyes, and boom, they were off and running, and haven't really looked back since. It'll take something similar like that over the next year or two, depending on who they're playing and what tournaments they're in to to get that back again. I do believe they're opening up in the next season against Gonzaga in Las Vegas, so there's a really good opportunity there to make an early splash. But again, we got to see what this team looks like and what what's going to happen here in the off season uh, to get an idea of what the roster is. The women, they've lost, or they will. It appears they'll lose 4 players in the portal. I think last time I did one of these things, Lana McCarthy and Kendall Puryear had already made it known they were going into the portal. Now you can add Nia Smith and Kiki Smith to that. Will there be another one or two? Possibly. I think Tara Day is a candidate to go. But that's been quiet. The portal opens on April 6th, the day after the national championship game, and it's open for 15 days or 2 weeks, 15 days. You have, if you're going to transfer, you have to get in the portal. You don't have to make a decision. You just have to get in the portal. You can make a decision at any time. Grad transfers can get in the portal at any time, but if you're not a grad transfer, you can't. I guess the one intriguing situation with the women's team is Taylor Feldman. She's a transfer from Northern Arizona. Didn't only played in 7 games this year. Had a back injury in the off season and just struggled to get back healthy. Early on, they decided that they would try to redshirt her. So her last game she played was November 30th at Central Michigan. She played in 7 games, which is the minimum or the maximum you can play, I guess, and still be considered for a red shirt. But Purdue will have to do the paperwork for that, send it in the NCAA and see if she gets granted a medical red shirt. But I mean, there's no guarantee that she'll stay. Um, I don't think that she's given a, a clear indication whether she'll stay or go. I mean, I'm sure her people are fielding offers or interest from other schools. Um, Purdue doesn't have a point guard right now. She would be a point guard, but would she be the point guard? I still think that Katie Gerald needs to upgrade that position. And she has money left over from her revenue share that's available until the end of June. Then a new cycle starts on July 1st. But they need to go out and find a point guard, one that can score, one that can facilitate, one that can make everybody around them better. It's great on paper, but I don't. It's very hard for this program to attract um, high level talent because they're not winning. I mean, they're just not. And that, I mean, no matter what you do, you'll have to overpay, which it's what it is. It's what it's going to be, and it's going to continue to be that way. But that's what she needs to do. She needs to overpay to find somebody that can come in and run the show and get things done. I mean, somebody there's always somebody on the team. There's always somebody in the workplace that makes more money than everybody else. It's just the way it goes. That's the facts of life. Walk down the hallway of the Purdue Athletic Department, this office, somebody makes X dollars. This office, someone makes either more or less, so on and so forth. I mean, it happens in every workplace. So you can't let that really cloud your judgment and get involved in that. But, you know, Feldman will be an interesting situation because she's likely to graduate this spring. Therefore, she becomes a grad transfer at that point, and she can go in the portal at any time. Where if you haven't graduated, you have to go into the portal during that window I talked about, April 6th to the 20th. But she's not going to graduate during that time frame. Um, so she could not go in the portal during that window, but graduate and then go in the portal. And that would leave Purdue's program in a not the best of positions. And that's why Katie needs to go out and find a point guard, and or find a combo guard, find a guard that can handle the ball and do all that stuff. And then, as I mentioned, Tara Day, I don't know if she'll get in the portal or not. Um, but I think that would probably be it. I think Avery Gordon's staying. The other players uh, on the team that have not said they're going in the portal would be staying. It's very interesting from a fan perspective. You go through the year and they're an under 500 team. I mean, there's no hiding that, and they've had three straight losing seasons. So something's missing from this program from a talent perspective and other things. But throughout the year, fans will you know complain, whether they write into the my Substack or do it on social media or whatever. Well, this team has no talent. This team doesn't do this. The team doesn't do that. And then you get a player like Nia Smith that decides to go in the portal. Well, that's a big loss. Or Kiki Smith. Oh, that's a big loss. How are they going to overcome that? It's like, oh, you can't have it both ways. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't say they don't have any. You don't have any talent, but then when the players start leaving, so how are they going to overcome that? It's like no, they're 13 and 17 this year. They're 13 and 17 this year. Not you know everybody's expendable. The bottom line is everybody's expendable. Um, and that's the way it is. I mean, no loss is a big loss in my opinion from this roster. Um, and it's that's not a demeaning comment towards these players. It's just no, but no loss is a big loss. It's just not. I mean, if you were if you had taken care of business and won the games you should have won, and you were playing in a postseason tournament that wasn't the NCAA, and you had some players leaving, there might be some losses there. But you're 13 and 17. You didn't get it done with them, so what would think you'd get it done with them again? So again, no loss is a big loss. It's just not. So the unfortunate part is that Katie now has to do this all over again. She has to recycle. She has to rebuild a roster again, and it's a never-ending cycle because you can't get out of it because you're not having success as a team, and you're not getting a high enough caliber of player, and you're just. I mean, it's Groundhog Day of college sports. I mean, you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and you can't get out of it. You can't. I get confused if he sees his shadow or not, what it means. Um, but that's the thing. You just can't. Right now they can't get out of it. And she's, they've decided to bring her back, so she has to figure out a way to move this forward the best way that you can. But it's very hard when you get um, can't get people to take your phone calls. You can't get the type of player, the caliber of player that you need to compete in the Big Ten. Um, it's very difficult. I mean, they're stuck. They're stuck in a place. I mean, this program is stagnant, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And right now, it's just kind of dying on the vine, um, with no really bright future in store. Um, would making changes, you know, change that? I don't know. Depends on what the administration did, but I'm not sure this administration is chips are all the way in the middle of the table with this program. Um, and that's but that may be the reality um, of college athletics now. You can only put your chips into the middle of the table with so many sports because you can't feed everybody. You've got to they've got to make decisions, and really the decisions are you have to spend your money in football and men's basketball because they're the two programs that make money. Nobody else makes money. Now there are programs in different schools that make money. You'd have volleyball at Nebraska and wrestling at Iowa and wrestling at Penn State, and some hockey programs might make some money across the Big Ten, but your two main ones are football and men's basketball. Women's basketball doesn't make money. Now, maybe at Connecticut it does. Um, maybe at Tennessee it does. Maybe at South Carolina it does. There might be a handful where there would be a slight profit in some of these, but when you factor everything in, scholarships and all that kind of stuff, it's really hard to make money. So you have to invest in the ones that bring you more money. Um, but this program is just kind of I think stuck. Um, it can't get out of it can't make a huge leap without players, talented players, and it's hard to get these talented players when you're not winning, and that's the situation that they're in. Um, so we'll see what happens. We'll see if the getting into the portal is done. We'll know next week if there'll be more. But again, the Feldman situation doesn't have to be resolved now because she'll probably be a grad transfer at some point and she can go in at any time. Um, but that's nothing has really changed in the women's program. It's just I think I mentioned the last time they have an assistant. They'll be having a new assistant coach. Um, but can you bring somebody here on a? I mean, Katie's on a even though she has a 3 year she has 3 years left on her contract. She's basically a year to year coach, um, based on what happens. But I think I said the last time I don't think Bobinski would make a move um, and fire her. He'll be gone before she's gone. That's I think I said that the last time, and I'll say that again. I think he'll up and retire before he makes a move on making a change in the women's basketball program. That's how I see things. But anyway, we're not going to know their roster for a while. Once the portal opens and official deals can be made and all that kind of stuff, we'll get a better idea. And um, they'll try to bring players in for visits. I don't think you can do this sight unseen. I think you need to get face to face with some of the players that you're looking at and kind of go from there. Anyway, that's kind of where they're at. The women's Final Four is set, all number one seeds, no surprise. And it's not boring. I mean, you have the four best teams in the country going to play in the Final Four, and that's fine. That's what you have. I think we're all rooting for UCLA and UConn to play each other. Um, I feel those are the two best teams, but Texas is playing really well. South Carolina is always a force. Um, so you do have the four best teams of the sport, and that should create interest in there. And it's not boring. Now their games turn out to be boring because they win by so much. But you do have the four best teams, and I think you have to appreciate that. I wish they would get out of this two regional format. When it started, I was interested to see how to play it out, and I wanted to kind of look at it and see, could this work? I don't think it's working. I think you need to go back to four regionals, because you're asking. You have a regional in Fort Worth, Texas. You have a regional in Sacramento. You're eliminating half the country and most of the population of the country from the Midwest to the East Coast. You make it harder for teams to go. Now, Texas, yes, they can go to Fort Worth. That's not a problem. Um, but even UCLA to Sacramento is not a short trip. Um, so I'd like to see them go back to get four regionals, get them in the East, South, Midwest, and West, and put them in places that you need one in the ACC, you need one in the Big Ten footprint, you need one in the SEC footprint, you need one in the out west, and that's how it should be. And you need to stay out of big cities. You need to get medium-sized cities, a place like Fort Wayne, Indiana. They've got a nice facility at the Memorial Coliseum. Seats about 10,000, 11,000. Fort Wayne's got its own airport, so you can get there. Um, and it's kind of in the middle of Big Ten country. And you've got places like Greensboro, North Carolina. Fort Worth was fine. It could be a Midwest regional site, South regional site. I think that would be fine. Houston was the South for the men. And if the NCAA is going to continue to use geography as its reason for placing teams, then you got to do it. You need to have a regional in the East for Connecticut and for other teams out there. You need to have a regional in the Midwest for Big Ten teams. You need to have a regional in the South area for SEC and Big 12. You need to have a regional out west to satisfy your UCLA's and your USC's and other schools that are out there, Oregon and Washington. And um, you don't have the Pac-12 anymore, but you still have good women's basketball programs out west. Um, and there's always going to be an East team that has to go west because that's the way it is. I mean, South Carolina's the number one seed. They're playing in the West. They're playing in Sacramento last night. Um, and maybe as the fourth number one seed, that's where they would have ended up in a four regional format anyway. So it doesn't, maybe it doesn't matter. But I wish they would go back to that. I mean, the other option would be do what volleyball does, and just if you're the number one seed, you get a host all the way through till you get beat. If you don't get beat, you go to the Final Four. That's what volleyball does. Their coaches are not afraid to play on other teams' home floors during the tournament. Women's basketball coaches seem to have a problem with that. They've always had a problem with that. They've never liked the idea that they don't they have to go on the road and play on somebody's home court. They've always screamed that's unfair and all that kind of stuff. Volleyball coaches don't have a problem with it because they do it. Purdue was ever in a position to be a number one seed in one of the regions, they would host all the way through as long as they kept winning. But now Nebraska gets to do that. Wisconsin gets to do that. Penn State has gotten to do that. There's other schools that get to do that. And one of the number one things that the athletes want is a good experience. And part of that experience is a good atmosphere at their games. And you get that in the first and second rounds because teams are playing at home. But you don't get that as much in the regional because your teams are not playing at home. And these regionals are in places where it's very hard to get to. It's hard for students to get to. And I understand women's basketball is not really a student fan game, but for the better programs it is. But you're cutting them off. You're not even giving them a chance to go to the games. When you put them, when UConn students can't get to Fort Worth, um, or Michigan students can't get to Fort Worth, or South Carolina students can't get to Sacramento. Um, So I'd like to see them change it. I mean, I think they need to go back to because you don't know where people are. I mean, you identify the men's tournament by the regions, the East, the South, the Midwest, and the West, and the cities that they're in. But for the women, it's very hard because they name them Fort Worth 1, Fort Worth 2, Sacramento 1, 2, whatever. It's confusing. I mean, it's good enough for the men to do it the way they do it. It should be good enough for the women. And the women's committee doesn't like to follow that. They want to create their own situation here. No, just follow what works. Just do what's best for the sport. Do what's best there. The men that figured it out, you know, might want to look at their plan a little bit before you immediately scoff at it. Because the sport is missing an opportunity uh, to really ride the wave of momentum that they've had. And they still have it, but it's going to die at some point. But volleyball has continued to build on its momentum. And as we mentioned at the beginning, something came out earlier this week. The Big Ten and the SEC are going to do a challenge where Big Ten teams play SEC teams over the course of a week or so, or it's going to be in early September. If I remember, I don't have the information right in front of me. I'm not a very good guy that gets prepared. Um, but two things from that: Purdue will be playing at home in early September. They'll play against Georgia and Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M is defending national champions. They went into Nebraska last year and beat Nebraska in the final eight, Elite Eight. I don't know if volleyball calls it that, but it was the Elite Eight. They won on their home floor, and they ended up winning the national title. So Purdue will have the defending national champions in West Lafayette in early September. The other part of that is there'll be two matches a day. Purdue will play Texas A&M on one night, and then the other match will be Indiana playing Georgia, and then they'll flip the next night. Purdue will play Georgia, and Indiana will play Texas A&M. The other part of this Big Ten SEC challenge is that I think it's the first Sunday, it's the first weekend in September that Nebraska and Penn State will play two SEC teams at Wrigley Field in an outdoor game. That's why I said the Big Ten has really gone all in on volleyball here. Things that they're doing to promote the sport, things that they're looking at doing. I mean, they're going to do it. With the word that came out over in the off season that you're going to see a Big Ten volleyball tournament, maybe not in 26, but certainly in 27. The Big Ten's trying to be a leader in this thing, and I think they've got their TV partners involved in the Big Ten SEC volleyball challenge, at least for the Wrigley Field matches. So they recognize that they have this opportunity here, and that volleyball is a emerging sport, a growing sport, however you want to phrase it, that they're trying to ride that wave, um, and make sure that sport is front and center. And the sport has done a lot on its own to get front and center, but it's also gotten a lot of help from the Big Ten and other conferences to push it forward even more. So things like this really, really help the sport. And I think volleyball, in some regards, has passed women's basketball as kind of the women's sport to kind of follow. It's much more, it's certainly much more exciting moments um, uh, than than women's basketball. Uh, you got you got more chances for maybe upsets along the line. Uh, Similar to A&M going into Nebraska and winning, and some other things. Like who's going to go into Connecticut and win in women's basketball? Not many people. It could happen, but not many people are going to do that. But anyway, they in their tournament they have it. They've figured it out that this is the format they want. That the higher seed teams get to host all the way through, and you guarantee yourself an atmosphere. You guarantee yourself fans. and interest and all that. So good for them. It'll be fascinating to watch the Big Ten SEC Challenge unfold, and especially from Purdue's standpoint, not a completely new team from Purdue, but they've added some pieces, and they've got um, some of their freshmen have come early. They've enrolled early, um, and I think they've just picked up one transfer. Uh, and they got some players coming back that really helped them um, make a run last year. So it'll be, there's real excitement there as there should be. Dave Shondell is going to be around for a little bit longer as he signed his 4-year contract extension. Um, so that's all good news on that front. Purdue baseball, they hit like 4 grand slams uh, against Michigan State over the weekend. I mean, that's just happenstance. It doesn't, you can't plan on that. It just happens. But anyway, where's the NIL deal with Denny's? Come on, somebody should be working behind the scenes. It should have been ready to go on Monday. That Purdue baseball has an NIL deal, or these players that hit the Grand Slams have an NIL deal. I think one player hit 2. Come on, Grand Slams, Denny's. It all fits. It all works. If I can think of this, other people can think of this, and you got to strike. You got to strike while it's hot. I don't know if they are or not, but that's my spiel for today. All right. Well, we appreciate you stopping by, and can't tell you the next time I'll do one of these things. We'll do it as news warrants and see what happens on the basketball front. Spring football is going on right now, but it's spring football. Um, there's just, I don't know. It's not on my radar. I never thought I'd say that, but it's not on my radar. Maybe I'll get it on my radar one day. But anyway, appreciate you stopping by, and have a good day.